But I'm sure by now you know about the Singapore Airlines plane that dropped suddenly after hitting turbulence on a flight out of London. Tragically, one passenger died and dozens were injured after being flung out of their seats. But even before a pilot could say, "Fasten your seatbelts," climate catastrophists latched onto the incident saying, "See, this is why we all need to eat insects, because turbulence, you see, is caused by climate change." Check out some of these headlines from around the world. NBC News went with this: "Climate change and turbulence. Experts weigh in after death on Singapore Airlines flight." Or what about this from The Guardian? "What causes air turbulence, and is the climate crisis making it worse?" And of course, our friends at the ABC went complete Chicken Little. "Climate change is fueling turbulence on some of our most common flight paths." Now, journalists quoted a study from the University of Reading in the UK that warns that a warming climate will affect the jet stream, which will cause more turbulence. But hilariously, they also acknowledged that the Singapore Airlines flight was thought to have been affected by turbulence not from a jet stream, but from a nearby storm. But don't worry, the ABC have got that covered as well. They wrote, and I quote, "As well as increasingly intense jet streams, climate scientists have warned that storms are worsening as well." So if global warming doesn't get you, climate change will. The ABC predicted that turbulence over Australia will increase by 50% around 2050 or 2080, whichever comes first. So the big problem for flyers is, how is this going to affect us? Well, they interviewed Paul Williams from Reading University, and he assured travellers that planes are completely safe in turbulence. They're not going to fall apart, they'll be unaffected, and hardly anyone ever gets injured from turbulence. But then ominously, he did say this, brace yourselves, and I quote, "The seatbelt sign will be switched on more often." I'm not sure it's safe to fly anymore.
There was so much victim blaming around this. The amount of people who were like, well, if they just had their seatbelts on, none of this would have happened. Like, there isn't always over the intercom, every time there's the slightest bit of turbulence, that voice being like, "Ladies and gentlemen, please make sure you've got your seatbelts on." I was just like, this is victim blaming. These people have been traumatised by what sounds like not your garden variety type turbulence. Sadly, a life was lost, so we know it was pretty violent. And all they can say was like, well, if people have had their seatbelts on, if only they'd have had their seatbelts on. But this has got to be up there with one of the most, silliest things that we are now taught to blame on climate change. It's like heart disease. We've all seen those studies, heart disease through the roof now because climate change. Your pet's health as well. Be very alarmed about that. They are going to be affected by climate change, any kind of extreme weather event, because we did not have those prior. No, this is unprecedented. Any extreme weather event, climate change, and on it goes. Meanwhile, we still haven't had one person able to prove that human emissions of carbon dioxide are driving climate change, is driving global warming. Literally nobody on planet Earth has been able to prove that yet.
I nearly had a heart attack myself when you used the word, it wasn't unprecedented, I forgot what the bloody word was. You've killed my joke, or I've killed my own joke now. Anyway, was there some word that was used during COVID? And I thought, oh, no, I haven't heard that word for ages. But your point about eating bugs, right, is not a stupid one, because we know that airline food is bad enough as it is, right? And look, sometimes you think twice about getting on a plane when you know what you're going to get served. If you know you're going to be served bugs on a plane, you'll be even less likely to get on a plane, which means you're far less likely to suffer any damage in turbulence caused by climate change. There is the argument for serving bugs on planes, though I suppose the alternative is that you might have been in the toilet bathing it up because it was that terrible, and then you would have hit the roof when the turbulence came along. But this, they're talking about this like, climate change is going to cause all of a sudden these major turbulence events like what we saw last night every second day. The last known, or what they believe to be the last known case of someone being killed on a flight from turbulence, apart from yesterday, was in 1997. That is how rare it is. And all of a sudden, you know, oh, look, there was turbulence in the air, which none of us have ever experienced before. And now we've got to say, yes, climate change, we've got to do something about it, because it's the first time in 26 years that someone has died in the air as a result or connected to turbulence, at least anyway. They will stop at nothing to come up with alarmism and anything to attach it to. I mean, you know, even walking down the shops, they'll say soon, because, I don't know, your shoes have got rubber in them or something. Even that's contributing to climate change. And you think
I'm surprised they haven't blamed inflation on climate change. You know, just given it a go somehow. Thought up an angle where they're like, well, look, you know, what with the climate change crisis.
The US Transportation Safety Board says that since 2009, so what's that, in the last 15 years, there's only been 185 serious injuries from turbulence. Yeah. And out of those 185, 129 were flight crew, which means they were typically walking down the aisle, no seatbelts.
Didn't have their seatbelts.
But the funniest thing about the reporting on this to me was CNN did this dramatic story, you know, climate change is going to make turbulence worse, it's going to make flying dangerous. And I'm reading this article, and then at the bottom it says, this article has been reproduced from 2022. So they just pull out this article anytime a flight is affected by turbulence. They just rehash the same old
Regurgitating.